Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newest episode of the Universal Church of Truth for Marvel Studios Miss Marvel Episode 3, which is called what? Damage?
Destined, what'd you say?
Destined? I knew it started with a D. Um, Damage. This is a much more emo show than we thought it was.
Danish, so I was like really concerned.
Danish. Oh, no, not Danish. Destined, which makes way more sense thematically with the episode that I just watched. We're going to start the way that we always do with Mary, please. Please give us your general thoughts, feelings, concerns, ideas.
Okay.
That's it.
I really liked it. I think it kept building on what was good about the first two episodes really well, and it didn't slow down much. The beginning of it really was like, okay, here's a lot of information that kind of takes it, if you didn't really know much, into a very new direction. And I liked that a lot. And there's still mystery going on, and I don't know. I'm skeptical at the whole explanation that we got, just because A, they're the villains, right? So whatever, and B, they kind of just brush by it really quick. So I'm like, but that will be interesting. But I liked how they got into it really quick, and it wasn't just kind of lingering around for an extra amount of time. Yeah, overall, I liked it. I thought it was solid. I don't think it felt like a game-changing episode of all time necessarily, but I think it kept building on what the series was already doing really strong.
I agree. I think I just truly enjoy this show so much. Disney Plus dropped a lot of stuff today. Multiverse of Madness is now streaming. Miss Marvel episode 3, Obi-Wan Kenobi finale. On the Netflix side of things, Umbrella Academy. There was a lot happening today in the nerd world, and I feel like Miss Marvel gets overshadowed in the public conversation, just because you have the Obi-Wan Kenobi finale, and a lot of people are rewatching Multiverse of Madness again, and it's this whole thing, which I think is a shame, because truthfully, as big of a Star Wars nerd as I am, and as much as I love the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, of all the things I've watched today, I had the best time just chilling with this show. I just think it's so fun. I have such a good time with it. There's a few moments I had such a genuine laugh out loud. I don't know.
I don't remember what they were, but I remember because it was 2 a.m. in my apartment alone with my cat, and I remember scream laughing real quick. So I'm like, this is kind of sad.
One of them, I'm blanking on the first one. I might have made a note, because maybe not. But I really liked the Brown Jovi was funny. I'm not gonna lie. That was a good. I wasn't expecting them to. that was really good.
Yeah, and they didn't. They were like, we do these bar mitzvahs.
It's just the way they revealed that and set it up was so good. Gosh, I forget what the other one was, but yeah, there was a few moments in this episode that I thought were wonderful. But you're right. I feel like the show isn't wasting time in the way that I feel like some shows do. Where I feel like, especially in these 6 episode shows, there's tends to be a really solid beginning, and they seem to know what they want to do at the end, and then the middle is either putting too much stuff in it or dragging a little bit. And I don't know. This is just a really solid episode 3. That does do a lot of revealing. I remember last time we talked about how we thought that the whole villains and that whole plot line might last long. They might play good guy for longer than we thought, and they didn't. They did for a scene or two, and then they were right no, we got some stuff that we got to take care of here. Which I thought was funny. But jumping right into the beginning, we start with a flashback we see the not necessarily the origin of the Bengals, but like how they got into the family. There's a blue hand. I don't know if we want to talk about that because it's blue.
I'm an idiot. Like I didn't pick up on any of this thing when I first watched it. I didn't, and I saw it later. I'm like, oh, I just thought it was like an old kind of sickly. I didn't think anything of it, and I didn't notice the 10 rings symbol that was just right in front of everyone's faces either. I didn't notice anything of that, but yeah. So there was a blue hand, which from what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has had thus far, probably means Kree, which makes a ton of sense anyway. But it does, I mean, it raised a lot of questions of where's the other? There's two. And then the theory that these are quantum bands or nega bands, that makes sense because there's generally two of those. But where is it? We don't know. They cut off the dude's arm. I like the theory that there's just a guy with one arm and the other one running around somewhere. I don't think that's probably it, but I like it.
Like in the Marvels, we're gonna see like a one Kree soldier with like he's missing an arm, and then he sees Kamala and he's like, "Hey, you got my band."
I enjoy that personally, but yeah. So it does connect it. Still kind of not super clearly, but it does connect it more to Captain Marvel, like that bridge to connect Kamala there is building. It does. It's interesting because it implies that the Bengals have not been in the family longer than her great grandmother, who's kind of the subject of this mystery, who was in the flashback. So that's interesting. I did because that's not super far back in terms of ancestry, and I don't know. So I'm curious where they go with that. I mean, I'd like to think we'll get a lot more answers next episode, given the pace of the show so far, because she's going to Karachi.
Right.
Or they basically imply she is. And that's kind of a whole arc in the comics itself. But I'd like to think next episode they'll shed more light on that, but I doubt it. Like, because that's an episode 5 thing in these shows. They love episode 5 to like tell you everything you want to know.
Right.
Episode 6 are like, okay, it's done. But hopefully it'll be a little different. It's been different so far. So like I'm actually hopeful beyond just wanting to be hopeful. What was the point of that? The blue hand, Kree, maybe.
Blue hand, yeah. We were talking about how it seems like they are connecting her origin more so with the Captain Marvel of it all, and trying to like tie her in more directly with that world than she is in the comics. Which I get from like an MCU storytelling standpoint, especially when they don't have Inhumans as like a pre-existing thing.
Yeah.
And they want her to be like a Captain Marvel corner of the MCU character. It makes sense. It makes sense to tie her in. But yeah, I still got excited. I saw the blue hand, and my little nerdy brain was just like, oh, Kree. I also didn't notice the symbol that was right in front of everybody's faces either until later. I was really distracted by the blue hand. That was like the main thing.
Someone kept saying to me, like, oh, the 10 rings were in this tomb or cave or whatever they called it. I'm like, why were the actual 10 rings? And and it took me so long to figure out they did not mean literally. I'm like, oh, like that's how oblivious I was. But cool Easter eggs. I think that's probably the first, except Iron Man stuff, like reference to like Shang-Chi that I can think of.
Good point. Well, I mean, because a lot of the projects that have come out since Shang-Chi, like, wouldn't have a reason, like, they wouldn't have a reason to reference him because it's like been Eternals or like Moon Knight or like that sort of thing. Yeah, no, I feel like it's gotta be. I'm not exactly sure where Shang-Chi takes place in the timeline, like before or after this, in terms of like him being a superhero that, although this show continues to make me question what people do and do not know about the superpowered beings of the Marvel Universe. Because like they reference Carol Danvers by name a lot in this, and they probably did it in the first 2 episodes too. But I just started to think like, at what point did everybody figure out that Captain Marvel is a woman named Carol Danvers?
part of me hopes they almost retcon that a little bit, but I don't think they will. I think they're just gonna like assume everybody kind of knows what we know from Captain Marvel Endgame, and it's like, okay, like it's fine. But I mean, yeah, but like, yeah, it doesn't make the most sense. Without like knowing anything else, like.
Yeah, that's just as well, because like
was secret, like nobody knew about that except like Nick Fury, right? But like,
right.
no, and then Endgame, okay, she came and punched him. So kind of, but why is she a household name at that point? I don't know. But
and also like it makes sense where like Tony Stark was a celebrity before he was Iron Man, and like to an extent, even Bruce Banner was like people taught his science in schools. Like he's on that mural in Homecoming. So like for characters like that, I kind of get it. Like they were sort of public figures already before they became Avengers and whatnot. But like with Carol, it's not like she was just an Air Force pilot, and then she disappeared for like a long time, and no one seemed to care or notice aside from like her loved ones. And she again, like she still has not really been on Earth. Like it's not like she came back and was like this big public figure and has been interviewed on for Entertainment Weekly about her role with the Avengers or something like that. Like she has been off planet. So I keep thinking, I keep being baffled by like the amount of knowledge that like the denizens of Earth seem to possess about, especially the cosmic heroes. There's a great Dr. Selvig reference though in this episode that made me really pumped. I love a good Selvig shout out.
I know, I got really excited about that too. I mean, he's just kind of like a very, at this point now, he feels like an OG classic character. Yeah. Like, even though he's a side character, but yeah, no, it was fun.
It's just like we haven't seen him or heard about him in a minute, so it was kind of fun to like have the MCU come back and be like, no, we didn't forget, he's still around doing his thing.
We know how to explain interdimensional travel. We've got a guy.
We got a guy who.
No more questions asked. It's possible.
Yeah.
Bruno had the paper. It's fine.
I'm glad. Oh no, please continue.
I was going to not rant, but has the MCU made any distinction yet, if they ever will, between multiverse and like different dimensions? So I know there can be a distinction. I don't know if they've done it.
Because,
and that matters in terms of the whole multiverse saga and/or Secret Wars that's going forward. So I just don't know if things like
because like they
the other dimension and this, it's in theory it's another dimension. So
right. I feel like they haven't made like an explicit distinction because there's like the idea of the multiverse, which is being explored a lot now. And then like Asgard is described as a realm, right? But it's also sort of like a different planet, and it's never really specified like what the difference between a realm, a universe, like a dimension, like how those exist. Because then you have like the mirror dimension, right? Which like exists between the other, like between the multiverse, and that's like how that sort of pans out, which is its own thing. And then you have like Black Panther and Moon Knight, where they have like these afterlives that exist as like their own separate dimension or realm or whatever you want to call them. They're like not in the multiverse, but they're also not like in our realm plane of existence. So it's like I feel like it's a little all over the place right now, sort of.
Yeah, I just kind of wondered what it would mean in terms of when you're getting into incursions and secret wars, like how much does something like this come into play there, or just not at all because it's a dimension, not a universe, But what made me really think about it was Bruno's whole thing of this can go really poorly. Like you can try this and really fuck shit up. So like, what would you be fucking up? I get something in universe, but I mean, you could fuck up a multiversal jump kind of thing. I don't know. And America Chavez, I mean, in the comics, she's from something outside the multiverse.
Yeah, like utopian parallel thing. That's like, that's and like it's messy in the comics too.
Yeah.
But when it's a comic book, you're sort of allowed to be messy. That's just like an accepted, like for the sake of whatever story you're telling. And I feel like this kind of connects more so with the MCU slowly becoming more and more just like a live action comic book universe, where I feel like they're starting to allow themselves that same messiness in terms of their storytelling, where they're like, as long as it loosely makes sort of sense, it's fine for like the story. But it's slightly more annoying because when you're using movies and TV shows, it feels like it should be less messy for some reason because there's less of it. I guess like it's more finite. I don't really know how to explain that, but I see where you're coming from because like in my notes I wrote down, you know, Kevin Feige keeps talking about how like, well, we're gonna find out soon what this new saga is, and but like we know, like it's like we're in the multiverse saga, right? Like we're building up towards some sort of secret war event, or at least that's what it feels like. It's what I believe, and so now they're in the same way that they sort of like forced the Infinity Stones into like every project, regardless of whether or not the comics were connected to the Infinity Stones. They're doing that with the multiverse now, which is fine, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, like this episode was very heavy-handed with like multiverse, like another dimension type talk.
And see, I mean, when the Miss Marvel comics came out, like the end of like her first run, so like in 15 issues or so, when that, but like Secret Wars happened. So like Secret Wars was like a big part of like her very early on thing, and that's like kind of how she met Carol Danvers in the first place, was in the lead up to that. So that also makes me, I mean, yeah, I think the general context of the MCU right now is kind of pointing there. So that's why I mean, I kind of assume eventually Miss Marvel's going to connect to that, obviously, but how soon? And is this part of it, or is this completely different? I don't know. I don't think there's an answer to that at this point. With the
Right.
different in them.
Well, like the all of this information that we're getting is supplied by the villains,
Yeah.
who I feel like are unreliable narrators. So, like, for me, my first thought was like, oh, they're this is another Mysterio situation, right? Like they're lying to her to make her believe this thing so that she'll help them, and like they keep saying, well, we need these to get home to our dimension, but they're like kind of evil enough that I'm not 100% sure that's like the only thing that they needed for. And so part of me was like, oh, they're lying. There's no like multiverse involved. But then the other part of me is like, well, the multiverse is the theme of the new phase of the MCU. So like I could also see them actually trying to tie Kamala into the whole multiverse saga this way by having her villains and her Bengals and all of that stuff tied to the multiverse, which is totally possible. Like you said, in the comics, it happens like so soon after she kind of like starts her solo run and all of that stuff. But I feel like this is a good way for us to get into who the bad guys are, which is more or less sort of revealed in this. We talked about it a little bit in the previous weeks. It seems those rumors about the Jinn and the clandestine and all of that are true, or at least based on what the villains are telling us right now.
Yeah, and that was it was cool to see them just come out and literally just say, what all the rumors said. It was like it was kind of satisfying. But to your point, and I kind of mentioned it earlier too, it doesn't feel like obviously not a full explanation. Like something happened to Kamala's great grandmother after the flashback we saw, and she disappeared. And clearly, there was some altercation there. There's a vision of the train itself at the end. Anyway,
Yeah.
kind of a whole event that I think happens afterwards that will.
I mean, I'm sure that they're like, well, that's the last time we saw her. And I'm like, there's no, like, you guys definitely, there was a fight or something. Yeah, for sure.
Realistically, I'm assuming it's going to be is Aisha at kind of the end of it when they're about to do whatever they're going to do with the Bengals. Like, wait a minute, you guys are doing something wrong. I don't agree with you, and they fuck her up, for lack of a better term. But I feel what they've said is that they are Jinn, which they kind of give like the Wikipedia version of it in the show too, when Bruno's Circle Q and Kamala's dad comes in because he literally reads it. I'm like, that's definitely what it reads on the internet when you Google it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Mythical beings from pre-Islamic folklore or something like that. But yeah, so, and they give like several different names. They call themselves clandestines, which is a nod to the clandestine. I don't know. I read things. I don't say them.
Because clandestine is like the comic book group.
Yeah.
Right.
The family that descends from a jinn. They all have superpowers from that. In this case, they're saying they all are jinn, but it still has that kind of weird family aspect of here's all these random different people that are kind of connected in the house that they all live in. I don't know. So, and then, yeah, they say that they are from a different dimension, the Noor dimension, which means light. That sounds sketchy, light. You know, I mean, it's like.
Although I will interject really quick to say one of the things I love about this show is that even when it gets really serious or like, they're diving into the backstory of the villains or whatever, like Iman Vellani is just so good, and I will keep saying this over and over and over again. She's the best. Like so much of why this show is good is because she's just killing it every second she's on screen. And I love when she's explaining it. No, when she's being explained to about the whole like Nor dimension and yada yada, and they're like, yeah, Nor, and she's like having a dead serious conversation, and then you can just see her mind break away for a quick second in that nerdy way, and she's like, Nor girl, no, that's not good, and then just like goes back to what she's talking about. I loved that so much because I was like, I would be doing the exact same thing, just workshopping superhero names in the midst of this like life-changing conversation. It was so good. Anyway, please continue.
I mean, that was mostly it. I will say what's interesting is how they're dealing with Kamran, because in the comics he was just a villain. He didn't have the greater family connections like this at all. But they kept kind of pushing, and I think I don't know, the way he ended in the episode, he was kind of like knocked unconscious in a brutal way. So maybe we think he's dead. I don't know. He's clearly not dead, but he still seems not villainy.
Yeah.
Even though the rest of his group he's affiliated with went villainy, still ample opportunity for that to come around at kind of the tail end of the show, especially if he gains her trust some more, which would be on Brain's comics character at least, but interesting. I don't know. And I think, I mean, he is different because in the comics he was Inhuman. We do appear to have Inhumans here. I mean, people will argue still possible and anything's possible. I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're trying to mimic all of its like elements and themes as best as they can.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think that it's gonna anyway. So he's kind of a weird caught in the middle of that too. But I don't know. The fact that they kept him looking like he's not one of the villains for as long as they still
right. And then the question becomes like, are they actually changing the character so that he has more of a heart, or is this part of like a longer con? Like, then he's just playing the game. And because I was surprised by that too, because I mean, again, I'm not quite as familiar with these comics, but I did know that he was supposed to be a villain. So I kept waiting for him to like flip the switch, and the whole time he's like, no, I have to come to your wedding and tell you that they're after you, and and that leads to that whole like delightful flipping of the fire alarm. She's like, stick with the classics, and then
something else that's interesting to me. They haven't, and they probably will if it's a thing, and I assume it is. But this concept of like in the comics, if they are like quantum bands or whatever they are, like you have to be a certain somebody to wear them. Not everybody can. It's kind of like Mjolnir. I don't think it's not like worthiness necessarily, but something similar. So I think that's kind of it's sort of spotlighted when they are asking her, like, please get us home, because they're not trying to take it from her. I think they know they can't. But
they need her.
And the severed arm was left there, so clearly someone cut off someone's arm trying to get it, couldn't get it. But then
right. Oh, that's good. Like they cut off someone's arm thinking, well, like it'll still be them using it, but once they presumably killed that person, it like didn't work anymore.
Yeah, and that's happened in the comics, and I'm not as familiar with stuff where comics are. I googled it, but like I know it's happened. And but then Kamala's great grandmother Aisha, she popped it open. She was like, "Woo,"
Yeah.
So I think that's going to come into play. I think she was probably the only one of that group who could use it. But Najma, hopefully I'm pronouncing that decently. Kamran's mom, main villain lady. She kind of ominously says to Kamala, like, maybe at some point Kamran will be able to kind of unlock his powers with it too. So there's kind of foreshadowing there, whether that's the second bangle or if that's that. But I mean, the concept of, and I think I mentioned it in one of other videos, of whether or not she can even take it off. I don't know. Could come into play, but they haven't mentioned that at all. Like it's not been like actually addressed.
Right. I did make note of that. I wonder. Well, first of all, the action scenes in this show were pretty cool. Actually, this was the first time that we see Kamala use her powers in like a combative setting. Thus far, it's mostly just been like escaping or platforming or whatever. And we don't. She actually strikes people very limitedly, but it was kind of cool to see her like instinctively using the shields, and when she like uses it to kick off the thing and slide under the table. And then eventually, once Bruno gets involved and whatnot, we see her actually do the thing where she makes like the big old fisty and punches someone and then pulls it back, and the music gets triumphant, and it's all fun. But yeah, I do wonder if like Kamran is going to get power, because he has a really distinctive like power look in the comics, right? Like he is all blue.
He kind of he almost looks like you've seen Osmosis Jones battle.
Oh my gosh. I was not expecting an Osmosis Jones reference today.
It reminds me of
Wow.
fish, but like translucent, kind of like a giant wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what he looks like.
Almost like.
And they explode. That's what he does. But
what if he does unlock powers and their version of it is he's just coated in the crystal light thing that Kamala can control, but it's like a full body, and he's like blue, and then he'll have to die. He'll have to die immediately because we can't keep him around if he has those powers.
yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So he does when he has powers. He looks weird. Dude. Yeah, I assume they're keeping him around to like build more of the Kamala, and then last minute.
Well, they need the love triangle to continue.
That's true, Bruno. Poor sweet Bruno.
I know. I'm fully team Bruno. I will always, every single time, pick the nerdier one, and I'm on his side for all of time.
Well, okay.
I don't care how cool of a fighter Kamran is. Bruno cares. Bruno went in there and he can't even fight, and he was throwing things.
No, I mean I really do, and especially now that he's dropping Dr. Eric Selvig around, he just does a lot of like wild science shit in the comics. Like he could easily become like a somewhat important MCU science figure, like pretty easily. It wouldn't be hard if they wanted to.
I feel like he would be best buds with Peter Parker. Like they would get along so well. I think the only difference is that where like the Peter and Ned thing works so well because Ned just like eggs him on. Like Ned is just like, "Oh, you want to do this super stupid thing? Yeah, that'd be great." And then I think Bruno would be like, "Bro, you gotta not. That's an idiot thing to do." But I was watching it. I was like, Bruno's giving me like big Peter Parker vibes in his like science, especially when he was like explaining. I think it was him explaining the multiverse or like getting into that with Kamala reminded me of the scene in Far From Home when Peter is talking to Mysterio and gets like really into it, and it's like kind of charming. And I was just like, they'd be buds. But anyway, yeah, I feel like Bruno has a future here in the MCU if he's playing his cards right. I mean, like you said before, he ends up in Wakanda at a certain point.
Yeah, and they're kind of the Caltech thing. They're kind of treating like that in terms of the story kind of vibe of it in the comics.
Of course.
So interesting. So in the comics, before he goes to Wakanda, and it's kind of part of his like, I don't know, he's upset, so he's sassy, and that's why he decides to leave vibe. But he tries to blow up like a door of a building to get people out, and he like fucks up like his arm and like I think his leg too. But his arm was in a cast for like a very long time. And at the end of this episode, it wasn't anything that dramatic, and he got thrown to a wall. But he like for the rest of the episode was like, no, my arm's really messed up. So I don't know if that's a nod to that or not.
I mean, it could be. It could just be like a precursor. Like we see he's willing to do something like that here, and then later on he does something more dramatic, and we like, all right, it's been established that he'd be willing to do it. Um, yeah, I think that Bruno's really great. Um, Nakia finds out about Kamala in this, and a question that I had for you was in the comics, is the idea of her finding out later than Bruno like also a thing? And if so, is she like mad about it? Is there going to be a whole dramatic thing that plays out here, or is she kind of like accepting of it?
So she finds out much later. Like Bruno knows from the beginning in the comics. She finds out much later. Kamala's mom actually like officially knows like relatively early on, and then but nobody else does except Bruno. But the way I remember it in the comics is she finally decides to tell her group of close friends, which at that point includes like Zoe, who right now is still the mean girl kind of thing. About it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we've known. It's pretty fucking obvious." So by the time she actually does tell them, I don't remember there being any concern. But for a while, Nakia, she is kind of that advocate in the community, and she does have problems with the way Miss Marvel operates in different ways, and we see that in this episode. That's like pretty obvious and laid out in this episode with once damage control comes to the mask, that she's pretty vocal about that. But yeah, so I mean, she does find out after like a pretty good amount of time about Kamala. So I thought it was interesting how quick she did. But it's a TV series, the 6 episodes. But the actual reveal in the comics, I do not believe was all that eventful. No.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I actually kind of like, I really like Nakia as a character, which I said before. And I like her friendship with Kamala a lot. And I was not annoyed, but I was just like, why don't we let's just tell her. Like, let's just tell her, because I feel like if Bruno knows, and like obviously you know because you are the person, like why not let the whole group in? Like, I feel like there was never a solid reason until this episode. There wasn't a solid reason for her to not tell Nakia. Because if they had established earlier that Nakia was like not into the whole like nightlight character, then that would make more sense. Because I could see a teenager being afraid of alienating their best friend. But until that moment, I was like, we should probably just let her know. But I don't know. I'm hoping this isn't like a thing where for the next 3 episodes they have this huge falling out and don't talk to each other. Like I hope it's kind of resolved quickly. Um, but yeah, I do like the possibility of that.
One of the saddest scenes in this episode was when she came home after the wedding incident. The family's waiting for her, and one of her parents, or maybe both, they were like, "You need to tell us what's going on so we can help you." Like, and she's like, "I can't." And it's like, can't you? Like, you can't. Like, I mean, like, if anything, like that's your best bet right now, considering something related to your ancestors, and there's people claiming to be Jinn, and there's a bangle that's in your family. Realistically, probably good move, but you know, teenage life, parents, superhero life. But that was very sad because it was kind of so. Because you're right. I mean, there's not been like, and I think as the viewer, we're supposed to know this is superhero stuff. They're a secret identity, you know. But there's not been a very explicit good reason why she can't if she wanted to.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand. This is another really good. This is Joe was really good at this on the Obi-Wan Kenobi pod, where he would accidentally segue like the exact direction I was gonna go a lot, and you've just done it. Yeah, this is great. I feel like like one of the big themes of this episode is family, which I thought was great, and I liked it a lot, and it's on both fronts. I mean, for Kamala and Kamran, and like the good guys and the bad guys, like there's this constant theme of family and doing things for family and having other people and yada yada yada, and especially on Kamala's side of it, I thought it was really beautifully done, and I enjoyed it. Um, but I think like being a teenager, it can be scary to tell your parents things that they're not going to freak out about because you just assume the worst. And I also think the episode makes, and again, I wasn't like raised in this culture or anything, but I feel like the episode makes a point of saying like, oh well, like I mean, I think it's literally said out loud, like, well, this Nightlight character, like, she's bringing a lot of shame to her mother, being like causing a stir like this, and like yada yada yada. And I feel like Kamala, especially being a teenager, it feels that almost more so than she does like the normal teenager stuff. And I think that that's what makes her afraid. There's probably also an element of her wanting to like protect her family from it. But I really thought she was going to tell them because they spend so much of the episode having her mom. There's like a back-to-back sequence where her mom gives her a really beautiful speech about family, and then her dad gives her brother a really beautiful speech about family. And I thought for sure she was going to like come clean to them.
No, I remember watching that. I'm like, I mean, I took 2 notes. Hold on, I'm gonna read them to you. They're
Okay.
really, really profound. Need 2 bangles and family. Those were my 2 notes I took at 2 a.m. Yeah.
I mean, everything we need is right there.
Exactly. And I do remember like those scenes were back to back. I'm like, that's a little probably more than we needed from a storytelling.
Oh, it was heavy-handed for sure.
But they're, and especially because they've like clearly set up a family theme in the other episodes. It's not like it hasn't been touched on. But to your point, like it's everything at this point. It feels like, which is good. It's cool. But yeah, they did do a backtrack. But yeah, I mean, with her mom in the comics, she comes home one night and her mom's just like waiting for her. Mom's like, I've known this whole time. Like, I'm not an idiot. Like, I won't tell your dad, but like, whatever.
I'm not an idiot, but your dad kind of is, so let's keep it a secret.
So it'd be interesting if they kind of go that path, especially because they're building up her relationship with her mom pretty specifically. I will say what's funny to me is her mom knows that she wanted at least to dress up as Captain Marvel and go to the Avenger Con. I don't remember what she was wearing.
Right, and then
I did saw her at the Eid Festival saving the kid in that outfit, and then everyone's like, "Oh, I wonder if this."
And then in this episode, they're like, "We saw Kamala pull the alarm," and like no one is putting anything together.
I mean, a cool thing would be if we find out later the mom was putting everything together and
Yeah.
anything, or just kind of like really. But yeah. And that's also how I felt in the comics too. I'm like, we did get a tease of her eventual mask, like her official.
A gift from Bruno.
Yes, and it was cool. She has not worn it yet that I'm aware of, unless I totally missed that. No, because she didn't wear anything. She was totally in.
It's gonna be, they're gonna pull the like wait until the last episode thing again.
But in the comics, that's what she wore, and I'm always like, how does nobody even slightly question? It's like in the very critically acclaimed original, well, the only Green Lantern movie. Reynolds has a thing, and whoever, it's his future wife, like Lively, whatever her character was, is like, you don't think I can.
I've always questioned the validity of the Domino Mask, because it just like, what are you hiding? you're not hiding anything. Like I could see your whole face. You wearing glasses is as effective.
Do I look different?
You're the same person. Like you look different in that you don't have glasses on. like
could I go around like this as a superhero and you would have no idea?
Well, it's like if you were a stranger that if you were a stranger that I had never seen before, and like I saw you from like a distance with glasses on or a domino mask for this, conversation. And then I walked by you on the street without glasses, I wouldn't think twice, but it's because I don't know you. So I'm not like registering your face, right? I get it for strangers per se. But like if I was your mother, do you know what I'm saying? Like if I was
I agree with you.
yeah, like, and even now, like I know you well enough now just from doing this that if a news footage came up and I saw you running around with the Domino Mask on, I'd be like, that's Mary. Like I could see.
I mean, right back at you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd at least question it. Like, okay, New York guy.
That's yeah, you'd be like, he's a male in New York City, so
Looks exactly like someone I know, but with a mask on.
but he like I can't see the skin around his eyes, so it could be anybody.
Eyebrows, right? Well, and everybody knows that's the key to identification. Eyebrows.
Yeah, it's just the I shave my eyebrows every time.
If you're on the run from the law, shave your eyebrows.
Just like that looks a lot like our suspects. Like, nah, our guy's got eyebrows. It's not this one. This guy doesn't have eyebrows. You're clearly confused. Um, just because we're talking about the scene, immediately preceding her looking at the Domino Mask, we get another iconic Miss Marvel comic book, page to screen moment. Well, not necessarily the moment as a whole, but dialogue specifically. Um, her version of "With great power comes great responsibility," which is good is not a thing you are; it's a thing you do. Which is fantastic. Like I've always loved that as her being her like coming of age catchphrase. I've always thought it was super great. And I was excited to hear it. I think it was in one of the trailers, but I kind of forgot. And then when it popped up in the actual show, I got excited again. Is it the same character who says it here as who says it in the comics?
I honestly don't remember. I don't. I don't remember it being. I mean, I never felt like it was as heavy-handed as with great power comes great responsibility. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
Spider-Man has a lot more history going on, but it's not something that I would have like written down in an essay about Miss Marvel like ahead of the show airing, even though I'd read like everything.
I mean, I know it pops up in the comics, and then they made a really big deal of it in the Avengers game as well. And there, I think her dad says it, and then she like repeats it later on to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark's like, "That's a great line." Um, but yeah, so I know that that has kind of whether or not it was originally intended to be, that has kind of become her like signature mantra is the good is not a thing you are, it's a thing you do. So Marvel Studios did choose to put it in here, which I thought was really nice. But I do kind of want to go back to the family thing in the sense that we talked before about how even though this is it's like a very similar but also very different take on the character from the comics. And it's also like you said earlier too, they're trying to mimic a lot of the same beats without having it be the same exact thing. Um, Having so much of her ability tied to her family and having them tied to her culture and all of this stuff, I was picking up on those beats as well, and I was wondering if you wanted to sort of like comment on that. One specifically was like I know a lot of people were concerned about how part of the whole like embiggening ability was that she was like young and she already didn't like so much about herself, and then having abilities that made her body quote unquote like grotesque or like huge hands or whatever kind of added to that, and it's a big part of her self-discovery. And I feel like there's a line in this episode where they kind of try to do the same thing uh, or a similar thing when she's talking to Bruno and trying to explain the gin. She references that like for her that's a terrible thing to be because she's like, oh, I couldn't be Asgardian or anything cool like that. Like I had to be the stuff from my childhood nightmares. Like I had to be the boogeyman that I was told about growing up. And I thought that was sort of mimicking like a similar beat of her being like, okay, my powers to me, based on growing up, represent something not good, and now I have to live with that on top of all my other stress.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a good take. I didn't necessarily connect in that specifically, but yeah, I mean, I think with her embiggening powers, like not only could she embiggen and have like really large hands or whatever, but she could just completely shapeshift if she wanted to. She doesn't do it that often, considering how useful that would be, but
Right.
that's, you know, why she looked like Miss Marvel in the first place. So it was kind of also like she could be something she wanted to be if she could, or she could shrink and disappear, or she, you know. So yeah, there. I mean, the embiggening definitely hit a wider range of not even just teenage, but like just self-consciousness and like
Body dysmorphia and like that whole thing.
yeah, all that stuff. And I think taking that away is definitely a downside in that respect. I've said it before. I like her comics powers way more than these. Like these are fine, but
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't have a reference of the comics powers, I wouldn't really think of it. But now it's kind of like, eh.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's fair. Yeah, I think I think they have to. She's a teenager. It's a teenage show, and Iman Vellani is great. So like they don't have to try that hard, but they can't use the powers as like the metaphor they need at every moment.
Right. And I think for me that was like it wasn't so much me thinking, "Oh, this is just as good." I could feel them trying to like hit that beat.
And they really do. I mean, I believe it. Like they do that at every moment. Like they try to hit that exact beat, either from kind of the Inhuman aspect or like from the comics aspect, but like whether or not they can actually make it the same, like they do try to hit it. I will say, like I've been very impressed with how much they have literally put in the show that's straight from the comics, even if it's not in the same order or if it's not as like big of a deal, like it's there. Um, Even though, yeah, as we talked about, obviously the Inhuman thing appears, I think, has been changed.
Yeah.
Although I will say, to your point, it's all about family and ancestry and heritage, all this stuff. Great, but if the bangle didn't come into the family until relatively recently, kind of like talked about it earlier in this episode, but the 1940s,
Yeah.
that's different. I mean, maybe it's not. I mean, they haven't explained it, but it's
I'm I'm sure they'll have because they we see that it hasn't come in. It didn't get to the family until the 40s, and when it showed up in the family, her great grandmother already had something inside of her that like allowed it to unlock. And they've made a really big point of Kamala, like the fact that the bangle isn't what gives it unlocks the power she already had, but then like it's not the thing giving her the power. So they have to explain that more. They have to. There's too much. There's too many like question marks still. But again, we have 3 episodes left, so I'm sure that they'll get to it.
that is part of, and a lot of the fun for me of the show is all the question marks. We've talked about the mystery behind it that a lot of, if not all of, like MCU shows and movies can't really get because they, you know, are based on comics and you can kind of figure out where they're going based on that. But because Miss Marvel has changed her origin, even if we know, okay, eventually she's got to meet up with Carol Danvers, going to Marvel, so all this stuff, we're still very confused at why she even is her in this respect. So that's fun. Ooh, something I think is interesting. Okay, so it is something in her family because her mom talks about all the time coming from a long line of women who are daydreamers, and it seems specifically to be women. And we know it's great grandma Aisha, her grandmother, yeah, is the one who also had the vision of the train at the end, and then Kamala obviously is doing her thing. So Kamala's mom, either something skipped a generation or she has that and doesn't want any part of it. And she
Like
seems
locks it down.
yeah,
Well,
she seems saying there's more. I mean, she calls it daydreaming, but she seems very like don't you dare fuck around that stuff. Like I've seen shit happen in my family.
right.
I'll be like, so I wonder if she's like knows a lot more, and she's like actively just trying to.
Well, thematically, that makes me wonder if that's sort of where like damage control comes into play, like thematically speaking, because another big thing and something else I was going to point out too, outside of just the like the Jin, my nightmares and yada yada yada. They also make a big point of this to say like, oh well, the government sees that there's this like Muslim girl with superpowers, and now that's like put this whole big target on our backs, and like she's so reckless, and like now they're like coming into our mosques, and like there's all this conversation about that. Kamala's mom has talked a lot about how like her grandmother was this, like you said, like daydreamer, and how that was like a big problem, and it like brings shame upon the family. And it's like I could totally see them connecting and being like, oh yeah, Kamala's mom has like known about this. She's known about it for a while. In the same way that you were theorizing that later in the show, her mom might reveal like, yeah, I know that you're like out being a superhero. I just was like waiting for you to tell me. Um, I feel like that could be the same scene where she's talking about it, and in her mind, she's like, I've known about this, but I sort of kept it unlocked because for me, just like having the stability of family and you guys, and like not having the Department of Damage Control like knocking down my door and all of that sort of stuff was like so much more important. But then having the flip side of Kamala being like I'm so glad that like you did that like for me and the family, but I need to do this. Like I have these abilities now. Like I need to go be a hero, and like I can totally see that happening.
Yeah, and I guess with her mom, we don't know that she didn't also see the vision of the train, because it just ends
Right.
with the grandma on the phone saying, "I saw it too. You both need to come to Karachi." And in the comics, the mom does not go to Karachi with her. So
We
I
don't
think
know how that's gonna play out.
it's fairly safe to say that her mom has a pretty good sense of what's going on and a lot of the answers we want. But yeah, I think you made a great point. She came to America. She purposely escaped a lot of the, consequences, implications of that, and wants to leave it behind. And then, yeah, obviously, Kamala is now the one kind of bringing it back up. So, but yeah.
On a slightly less serious note, I do really like how dramatic the villains are in this episode. Um, I mean, a lot of their weapons and stuff are just like the whip attacks were like way over the top, but I loved it. Also, I like that. Again, blanking on her name, but evil lady. Kamran's mom. I don't know. She gets so upset so fat. Like one minute she's being super nice to Kamala, and then Kamala doesn't even. To be clear, like I don't think I missed anything, right? She didn't actively betray her. She was just like, I'm going to my brother's wedding first.
Yeah. I mean, the most she said was like, I need a little bit more time to think about it because
Right.
I've heard it's dangerous.
And then this lady like shows up. She's like, I'm gonna kill your whole family. Like, I need you to. And Kamala's like, why are you doing this? She's like, you betrayed me. And I was like, did she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I
really?
mean, really, they really didn't play their cards right. I wonder if there's like I don't think so. They haven't suggested, but there's like some sort of weird time crunch that they're working on. I don't, other than she got really upset, really angry, and acted really quickly. I don't think there's anything.
I mean, I just chalk it up to like that's just the character. Like she's just like doesn't care about Kamala's family or anything, and she just wants whatever she wants, and that's fine. I just think it's funny that she phrases it that way. She's like, "Well, then you betrayed me." I'm like, "But she didn't. She just went to her brother's wedding. Like that's it."
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do the clandestines, or the Jinn, that whole family, did any of them have? They had some weird weapons, but did any of them have like powers? I really don't remember. No.
No,
Okay.
they were extremely skilled fighters.
Okay.
And then they had like cool weapons.
Yeah.
Weapons seem to be not necessarily like supernatural, but like the one guy like tapped his chest and then it like turned into So I don't know if you count that as a superpower or just like a.
That one was the trickier one.
Yeah.
I do remember that. Yeah. No, because I mean, I don't know. You're talking about people from other dimensions or doing all this. Ooh, we didn't talk about. They did say they got exiled from the dimension they were trying to go
Right.
back to, and we did not ever yet hear why. And I mean, that's always a red flag. I mean,
It's usually typically when that's like a general. I mean, General Zod got exiled from his dimension too. Like
Kamala never questions it. She's like, "Oh yeah, you just want to go back home. I get it. Yeah, 100%. I will help. Oh, exile. You want to question? No, they just casually drop that like it's."
yeah, they did.
I
In fact, they dropped it so hard that I forgot about it until you just brought it up.
mean, maybe it's just like you wouldn't share that maybe if you
Right.
were,
Right.
or someone would say, "Hey, why?"
Or
But
at the very least, you give like the big like, well, we were just misunderstood
yeah,
speech.
exactly. And I think I kind of expect that a little bit going forward.
Oh,
It all depends. It all depends on if like the Gen thing's like really a thing because they do just gloss over it so quickly. Like I was surprised how sort of flatly they go over that. Like it's cool and there's bigger implications, but it does usually when you have dramatic shit like that, you will get some sort of flashback or like some sort of visual aid of what they're talking about.
or they would show like this big like sequence with the Jinn using their powers and all this glory and like yeah.
Very rarely, if ever, have especially Marvel Studios just casually said it and then it actually be what it is.
Yeah.
Not it's never happened, but that's just usually not. Especially if you are trying to explain new, very big concepts like a different dimension or a whole new kind of category of beings, you know. So, but I don't know what that would mean if that's completely false. I don't know if it is, but I don't know.
I feel like there's got to be. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some level of truth to it, even if they're not using the correct like words, like they're masking over it with words that they know Kamala might know, that sort of thing. But no, there's definitely something else. There's it's still sketchy. There's still this is some sketch going on for sure. Um, one of the last things that I had on my list to point out, though, story themes, Easter eggs, breakdowns aside, um, that wedding was just delightful. Like I was and sitting in my own home. I wanted to join. I wanted to be there.
So they released the clip of it, or at least
Yeah, I didn't watch the clip actively because I wanted to just experience it.
Twitter when I was scrolling, and I was like, I don't think I watched it, but I mean, I kind of saw it happening, but I didn't click on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to be fair, like it does not flow seamlessly into the episode, but it is great.
It
Like,
is. And I didn't need it to flow seamlessly.
it's like just not destroyed, but it's ruined with the fire alarm. It's all.
I was just happy they at least got like married before. Like they are legally married and it was just the reception that was ruined. Although the other bride who was crying, I imagine that maybe it was more ruined on there.
That there were multiple like
Yeah.
things going on.
Although to be fair, this is a really good like that seems ridiculous. But when I was at Star Wars Celebration, this is a funny story that I haven't told on any platform yet. Um, when I was at Star Wars Celebration, one of the last nights that we were there, uh, the hotel I was staying at, which was essentially connected to the convention center in Anaheim, had not one but two weddings happening at the hotel on the same night. And the funny thing was, it was also the hotel that they put all of the press in for a Star Wars Celebration, and like basically the hotel was entirely the two wedding parties, and then just hundreds of Star Wars fans. And the hotel did not tell either wedding that Star Wars Celebration was happening at the same time that they booked their wedding. So we are all like at the bar and in the lobby, like drinking and celebrating the end of Celebration and all of this stuff. and there's like these weddings trying to play out. I looked outside my hotel window, and one of the weddings was just happening. Right, like I was there. Like I closed the shades because I felt like I was intruding. And apparently, one of the weddings was fine with it and thought it was really funny, and then the other wedding was pissed that Star Wars Celebration was like part of their special day, and they were so upset because they thought they had the hotel themselves. But anyway, the point of that story is to say it is entirely possible for a hotel to be hosting two weddings at the same time.
They basically laid that out very casually, but I was like really thinking that through too much. I don't know. I don't do a lot of weddings or wedding receptions, and I don't know if I've ever been to one in a hotel either. So I'm just sitting. I don't know if that was that a hotel. Actually, was it in the
That I was
show?
at?
No, in the show. Like,
Oh yeah, I don't know. I guess they didn't specify. It could have been like a convention center type scenario.
I was picturing like a one event space kind of building. So I'm like, well, where was this other way?
Right.
Where is
Right.
it? Yeah, okay. I'm just clearly I am from a small town in the
I
Midwest.
mean,
Really
so
don't.
am I. But I also like.
Small town in the Midwest.
Oh, not in the Midwest. I'm from a
Yeah.
small town in Western New York, which is kind of similar. Um, but also, she pulled the fire alarm, and it apparently didn't go off in the kitchen. You know.
Yeah, that's true. But then they didn't care either until someone got hit. That was funny.
That was the other one I laughed out loud at. We
When they
got there.
knocked out, they're like, nope.
There's absolutely not, and then walks out. We did it. I think there's no better place to, unless you have, do you have anything else you want to talk about? Because if not, I feel like that's the perfect, we just came full circle. That was the moment I couldn't remember an hour ago. And when we started this,
I'm satisfied.
I'm satisfied too. The universe just told us it was over. All right. Well, on that note, everybody, thank you so much for watching. It's been another great week discussing Miss Marvel. We will be back next week for Miss Marvel episode 4, titled TBD. I have been one half of your host, Hunter.
I have been the other half, Mary.
And I think we did a pretty good job. So if you didn't like it, don't watch anymore, I guess, because I thought it was pretty good. All right.
You millions of people, stop watching.
All of you millions of people, go leave. Stop watching. No one tweeted at me after the last episode, so I feel like
I did think about that. Yeah.
yeah. So you're either shy, and don't be shy. Tweet at me. I crave social interaction, so do it up. Anyway, bye.